Good morning, and welcome to the First Unitarian Church. Welcome back to this progressive religious community where we gather as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. And welcome to you who are here for the very first time. We strive to be a house of freedom, guarding the dignity and worth of every person. And if you're new here for the first time this morning, thank you for dropping in and having a look. If you are perhaps puzzled by an unusual display of demonstrative greetings among the members here, it's because most of us haven't seen each other over the summer months. It's one of those curious things about a church taking a summer break. But we learned that absence indeed makes the heart grow fonder. The doors to this church were more than just kept open during the summer. We were blessed with tremendous programming throughout our Summer Forum series, and we are fortunate to know the source of those blessings. And thus, may we say thanks to Tim and Kathy Chambliss, Shirley Ray, and Dylan Zwig. Thank you so very much. By the way, when Summer Forum ends, Tim Chambliss goes back to being Tim Chambliss, because during the summer, when new people come in, they often approach him and say, "Good morning, Reverend Goldsmith." And sometimes he says, "No, I'm Tim Chambliss." And sometimes he says, "Well, yeah, good morning to you." So, anyway, back to Tim Chambliss, which is a good deal. Last Monday, the great eclipse. How many of you traveled to see the full eclipse? Well, okay, wow. How many of you took it in from right here, 91% coverage? Not bad, not bad. Anyone here not wear special glasses, like someone we know? My thoughts during the eclipse may very likely have been similar to yours. First of all, what a wondrous sight to behold. I mean, just the mechanics of heavenly bodies that are always in motion, sometimes lining up to render its most beautiful self, a showcase for beauty, awe, and wonder. Oh, the enormity of it all. Stars and moons and galaxies and black holes and a limitless beyond the beyond. This goes on forever. And our human significance diminished as the vastness and rhythms of the heavens loom with utter poignancy and power. And all the while I wondered about our very tiny earth and the miracle of human life shuffling across this orb that originated some 5 billion years ago. Put into this context, life can only be viewed as unusually precious. And I think, what are the odds that there's even life to begin with, let alone actually being present right here, right now, looking up at the workings of the universe? And then, of course, rather than expressing gratitude for this miracle of life, where we are blessed with love and friendship and art and literature and music and meaning, what do? We fight each other, exploit one another, and even exploit this tiny orb, our home in space. Now, it's truly humbling to take a moment when a swath of our nation is cast in darkness, and we realize how carelessly we treat this gift of life, and how irresponsibly we move through the world as though we are the ones who matter. We, who are so dependent on the light and the seasons, and would not inhale a single breath of air if it weren't for the natural wonders that make it possible. Now, during that short moment when the moon passed in front of the sun, didn't the astonishing miracle of creation somehow magically touch our spirits and pose the sobering question of what are we doing with this gift of life? What a privilege it was to see the eclipse, and what a privilege it is to spend this minuscule measure of time with a beating heart, a thinking brain, and hands that can either build up or tear down. And I thought, what are we doing to the world? What are we doing to each other? How ought we live our lives? Symbol of light and of knowledge, symbol of warmth and freedom, we light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. Here we gather to celebrate hope and the infinite possibilities of love. May we open our service, turning our hymn books, please, to number 347.
good it is to be together again. How good to see each other's faces in this beloved place of memory and hope. There is no end of sorrows outside these walls, but in here, today, we leave all our burdens upon the altar of one another's fellowship and take refuge in one another's love. For generations, Unitarians have united not by creed, but by covenant, our mutual agreement of how it will be when we are all together. And for generations, Universalists have affirmed the inherent worth of every living soul. We invoke a mighty cloud of witnesses when we take to ourselves the names Unitarian Universalists. And by coming back together again and again and again, we establish a foundation for those who will come after us. Let us now give one another a very precious gift, the gift of a few moments' silence, in which we may reflect upon our covenant together and our dream for the year ahead. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. May it be so. hear these words from Reverend Tet Gallardo, minister in the Philippines. There's my temple, believer, unbeliever, or wild one, you are welcome. We have no definition of who we are, but human. We have no code, but that of respect. We have no creed, but that of equality. There's my temple, identity seeker, sinner, stateless or not. You are welcome. We have no constraints on expression, but space. We have no code to listen to, but poetry between the silence and the surrender. There's my temple, nature tripper, urban dweller, or saint. You are welcome. How shall we divide the world but by our breath? We have no pope above us, no infallible bull. We have no judgment, but in terms of harm. There's my temple. History maker, marginalized, unorganized. You are welcome. We have no covenant among us, but mutual assistance. We insist on no assumptions and doubt moral facts. We are free to theorize with emotion and call it hope. There's my temple, unbecoming, expert, robed or not robed. You are welcome. We have no dwarfs or giants. Goliath fell long ago. We have no seal on revelation. Tentative is truth. Lead by your desires and serve by your power. There's my temple. Funny, temperamental, shy, or wise, you are welcome. There is not one way of being human, not even Superman. We have no world but that which we together create.
I don't usually do shout-outs from the pulpit, but I'm going to do one this morning. David Owens, welcome back. For all your travels this summer, you are now exactly where you belong. I understand there's this theory that one of the hallmarks of a great church is the number of announcements. The more announcements, the greater the church. I don't know if that always works out, but we sure do our best to be a great church through the announcements. What I want to do is just trust you that you seriously will read these announcements, because they pertain to the many facets of special things that we do in this church, whether it be committee work or religious education or social justice. Please just be apprised of what is happening. Let me just mention a couple of things in particular. One, this must be, I'm just guessing now, maybe the 15th year that we're doing the small group ministry. And it is time to register for the small group ministry. It is right there at the top of your announcements. Please read the specifics. For those of you who still aren't sure what that means, it is just a golden opportunity to meet once a month with about 10 to 12 people to discuss matters that really are in your heart, what you've been thinking about. It's not a therapy group, it's not a book group, it's not a discussion group per se, but it's a chance for people to come together to really get to know each other way beyond so much of the surface conversation that happens during coffee hour. It is just a wonderful, wonderful avenue by which we can even draw closer together as a congregation. Please read the specifics and register for this year's small group ministry. Also want to mention, and this is not in your order of service, that our church is working with two other churches, so I guess it's officially an interfaith enterprise. We're working with Christ United Methodist Church and St. Paul's Episcopal Church, and of course San Esteban. We are working on providing sanctuary, and in all the meetings, everything has been quite theoretical. What do we do when? What do we do if? How do we do? So the theoretical has become real, and there is a family now, an immigrant family, that has been pursued by ICE. They went to hide in a hotel. They've obviously run out of money to pay for a hotel, and they are now in not the custody, I don't want to use that word, but they are now in the company of Christ United Methodist Church, which has a wonderful apartment center, like 5 rooms and showers and kitchen and all those great things. So they are now at Christ United Methodist Church. That congregation alone cannot satisfy, the needs that there are, other people present in the church during the time that they offer hospitality. So they are asking their other churches in this interfaith venture, from San Esteban, from St. Paul, and First Unitarian, if we would have some volunteers to simply go and hang out with the family that is currently there. If you would be able to provide that very noble service, please talk to Joan Gregory following this service. Sign up for it. I think they intend to be there a while, so it's not just, you got to be there today, although that might be nice. But just think about your own schedule and the possibility of volunteering at Christ United Methodist Church, which is just down on 33rd South, not terribly far away. And I hope that we are able to hold up our end of this really important movement in providing sanctuary for undocumented workers. We do a lot of work, as old-timers know, with the International Rescue Committee in terms of furnishing their apartments. And we are expanding that program. And what's going to happen, we really don't do this, but I just want to give you a tip. And that is, at the end of the service, we're going to take just a few minutes, and Andrea and Johanna are going to tell us about new ways that we can all participate in our refugee program. It's really quite exciting because, you know, even though we have about 50 people who are working with this program, you know, if you just don't have the muscle mass to carry a couch up 4 flights of stairs to kind of get the apartment ready, there are other things that you can do. So we can certainly expand our support of the refugee community, and so stay tuned, and we'll just have a really brief promotion, really important, because that's going to happen right after church. And of course, for some reason, the important announcements just don't make it to the order of service on time. So let me just say, as our closing announcement, today is the Reverend Monica Dobbins' birthday, and so let's wish her a happy birthday. Maestro! Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Monica. Happy birthday to you. I pray she is not a vengeful woman. Indeed. Well, at this upbeat moment, what an excellent time to ask for the offering to please be given, and a chance to greet one another and welcome each other to the First Unitarian Church. Well, your summer was probably a lot like mine. Regardless if you traveled to exotic places or stayed mainly at home baking in Salt Lake's hottest temperatures ever, I will always remember this summer as the summer of high anxiety and late-breaking news. I mean, I would wake up in the morning and, like an addict, immediately dial up the latest breaking news. Then, after walking the dog, Mary would ask me over breakfast, "Did you get the latest news?" I said, "Yes, I did." And she said, "No, you didn't." Breaking news set a speed record this summer. I was out of breath most of the time. You know, I've always, maybe some of you have been noticing this, but I'm always really fond of the term, I don't know why, beyond the pale. And I never knew exactly how far away the pale was located, let alone move beyond it. But I took it to mean that some behavior was simply out of bounds, outside a standard of decorum that was required for civilization to continue. Well, following the president's stream of consciousness on Twitter this summer, beyond the pale stretched the mind to unknown destinations, very, very far away. So far, in fact, they defied gravity. They distorted all measures of moral philosophy beyond recognition. And so for the sake of preserving our sanity, I know that many of us tried a self-imposed news blackout. I became convinced that NPR was hazardous to my health and that MSNBC represented a form of torture. Now, I would not subject myself to that any longer, and since I have Sirius XM radio in my car and can tune in everything, even Mars, I spent 3 days listening to nothing but Broadway musicals. I was fine with that, but it made Mary very angry, because when I'd come home and she wanted to discuss the latest breaking news, I'd burst into happy talk, keep talking, happy talk, talk about it. Didn't work, so I had no choice but to finally man up. Trump was not going to interfere with my marriage, so I went back to reading the failing New York Times. Why this visceral reaction? Well, you've all heard of the Antichrist, but that doesn't work for Unitarians who proclaim the 7 principles as their moral compass. But Donald Trump has systematically contradicted all 7 principles, from the inherent worth of all people to the interconnected web of all existence and everything that lies in between, such as global cooperation, democratic process, justice, compassion, and of course that responsible search for truth and meaning. When it comes to the principles, he is 0 for 7. He represents the heart of darkness. He is the anti-UU principles. But I was fortunate to have some delightful diversions this summer. I had the distinct honor of officiating the wedding of Tim DeChristopher, who married the perfect partner for his life, Megan Coleman. Now, for those of you who are more recent to this church, Tim was a member here who galvanized this church with his act of civil disobedience in December of 2008, eventually serving 2 years in federal prison for his method of protecting land in southern Utah from oil and gas drilling. Let me tell you, it was a fantastic and memorable wedding. It took place on Megan's family farm in western Connecticut. To tell you the truth, the wedding really felt a lot like Woodstock. Hundreds of people attended. Most of them were camping out there on the premises. Like Woodstock, we had light rain, which didn't dampen anything. Great music provided by a marching band, which serves as an activist marching band with whom Megan plays at protest rallies. The band played on in full throttle, replete with whistles, women tuba players, and just dancing up a frenzy as they performed. There are quite a number of Unitarian ministers there, actually, and I showed great restraint by not saying, na, 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 na. But of course, I was invited to officiate not because of me, but truly as a representative of all of you. This church community taught Tim the power of religious community that serves as a source of strength and support, the likes which could never have been received anywhere else. You mean a great deal to Tim, and you have actually helped shape his life. The wedding had great celebrities: Bill McKibben, Terry Tempest Williams and her husband Brooke, Pat Shea, who spoke here last week and served as Tim's lawyer, the documentarians who filmed Bitter 70, and a good crew from Peaceful Uprising right here in Salt Lake City. They all managed to come out there, and I'll tell you, I'll confess, I had one of the greatest moments of my life right there at the wedding when, I've been following Bill McKibben for more than 25 years. His books, his articles in the New Yorker, his 360, when he spoke here at the university, do the math. I've just been a wild about Bill McKibben. And my great moment was when I spotted, right after the wedding, I spotted Bill just, across the little pasture there, walking his way towards me. He came right up to me and mentioned me by name. He said, "Tom, that was a great ceremony." "Thank you, Bill. That means a lot to hear you say that." And then I fainted. Terry Tempest Williams, our church's Fairly Free Thinker Award recipient 2 years ago, regaled me with some stories on her trip to China, which she took just before coming to the wedding. In fact, she flew straight from Beijing to Cornwall Bridge, Connecticut. I think I'll always remember her telling me of getting a massage in China. You can imagine that she's on the table, right? She's on the table. And the masseuse says to her, "Oh, really tight over here. Oh, too many knots over here. Oh, this is not good." And so all I could say was, "Donald Trump." And the masseuse answered, "Don't worry about Trump. He will not live long." Well, somewhat stunned, Terry asked the masseuse, "What do you mean? How do you know this? What are you saying?" And she said, "People who carry that kind of hatred within do not live very long." Wow. We will see. After the wedding, I returned home, packed quickly, and Mary and I were off to our paradise location in West Marin, an old hippie town on the coast called Bolinas. And again, for those who are relatively new to this church, I customarily offer a little update on Bolinas, little because nothing much ever really happens there. Beat poets once ran wild there. In fact, I stay in a house sandwiched between the house where Richard Brautigan committed suicide on one side and the son of Ferlinghetti on the other side. And right up the hill, if you kind of go outside and stand right and you get a direct line, you are able to see the house where the actress Frances McDermott lives with her husband, Ethan Coen, one of the Coen brothers, not to be confused with the Koch brothers. Big difference, let me tell you. And the oceanfront home that belonged to Jefferson Airplane is just down the street. And believe me, I'm just scratching the surface. It's an unusual community. This summer, I took note during my early morning walks to the beach, just before the mist burned off and the fishermen were just getting their dinghies ready for their day's work at sea. I noticed the different ways in which people approach the shoreline to offer thanksgiving for the miracle of oceans and waves and tides and playful seals and sand and shells and the immensity of blue reaching out to touch the horizon. Always facing the ocean, I witnessed people who would walk the shore and spontaneously just break into song as though welcoming each wave rippling towards the sand. I saw a woman of ample heft suddenly break into dance as though possessed. Her thanksgiving for the splendor of the morning was manifest by her own freedom of movement, uninhibited. She was absolutely spectacular, and you would think she could have been a principal dancer at Ballet West. She just did her dance. It was this kind of infectious freedom in which a man with a guitar strapped around his shoulder, facing the power of an eternity of ocean, delivered what was surely the concert of his lifetime, singing to the fish and any of the sandpipers who happened to fly by overhead. And I watched these offerings of gratitude from my own meditative vantage point, perched on an assembly of rocks piled high enough to offer a God-like view of creation, which he called good. Indeed, I had to agree. Now, Bolinas can do that to people. This spiritual liberation is somehow in the air, in the sea, and in the history of its erstwhile hippie worldviews. Among the few boutiques in the actual little village, my favorite one brashly displayed its politics in the window with a message from Jerry Garcia. It read, "Somebody has to do something, and it's just incredibly pathetic that it has to be us." Yeah, well, I think those words were prophetic. It has never been more clear until this year that our pitiful, non-activist and self-absorbed lifestyles must be aroused to meet the horrific crises of the day. So much of this summer in particular, reminded me of playing outside in the garden with my granddaughters. And they are at that stage in life where there's no greater toy than sticks and shovels or anything that can move dirt around and displace rocks. And sometimes, perfectly intent on moving quite a sizable rock, they would lift it from the ground and in great shock and dismay behold what was underneath that rock, all that icky, ugly vermin that were now exposed. That's where the ugly lives, I say. And unless we remove a rock from its mooring, we can pretend that the ugly doesn't exist. In fact, we prefer not to see it and just carry on normally in our gardens undisturbed by the slimy creatures which exist beneath the rock. This summer, the rock was lifted. And what was exposed was even more ugly than we could ever have possibly imagined. And tremendous despair set in. Yeah, somebody has to do something. It might even need to be us. As with every generation that ultimately had to face the shadow side of humanity, our choice is either to deny it or address it. It begs the question, who are we really in this moment of time? Who are we when white supremacy sits poised to dominate our nation's creed? Will we address this subterranean slime that currently infiltrates the politics of our day? Will we begin to tell the story of America's true heritage and tradition in a different way? We clash over who controls the narrative of what democracy, what America, what justice really looks like. It remains imperative that we not rely on hope as our salvation. The belief that, everything will be just fine in the end. Because the evidence around us suggests otherwise. The evidence around us demands that we act. Hope. We got to remember, hope is just the beginning. It's not a substitute for action. No, it's only a basis for it. Or as Rebecca Solnit puts it so eloquently, hope gets you there, work gets you through. The prescient words of George Orwell ought to help us understand the significance of why we need to resist the current onslaught of efforts to rewrite history. Now, Orwell said long ago, who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. And among the tools, the many tools used by the right, they make a brazen attempt to amend the narrative of our Confederate heritage, where monuments to white racism invoke now this glorious past. Remember, who controls the present controls the past, and who controls the past controls the future. There is much at stake in today's struggle to define the past, to understand whether America's past signifies the dire need to make the present and future more just and diverse, or does the past recall a great period in America when white supremacy, Jim Crow, and segregation were intrinsic to the mores of our nation? Now, understanding that the past actually represented a time when being queer was illegal, women had no reproductive rights, rivers caught fire when pollution went unregulated. Understanding the past carries major implications for the moral obligations that we need to address today. It is entirely up to us to move into the future as a diverse and multicultural America seeking justice, compassion, equity for all. There go those UU principles once again. We need to fight for those principles. We need to fight for them now. Let's admit, we have largely been asleep, afraid perhaps of seeing what lurks beneath the rock. We have been comfortable in our gardens. No need to encounter that which is simply unacceptable as long as it remains out of sight. As a church community, we must decide and determine what we stand for. This church has been blessed with a proud history, to be sure. But it's easy to rest on past accomplishments. Distant memories won't shelter us from a growing number of extremists advocating white nationalism as our nation's beacon into the future. The stakes are really very high right now. And we as a church institution must recapture our moral authority. The principles of justice, intrinsic to our Judeo-Christian heritage, must be woven again into the very fabric of our nation. We must come to fully own our responsibility to control the present, offer honestly a sincere, a genuine narrative of the past, and steer our country clearly into a future where our children will be safe from the vicious attacks of hatred. Pathetic or not, we have to do something about this present untenable situation. If not us, then who? Under this church roof, the intolerable will no longer be tolerated. In this church community, we will not look away. And we will teach our children what we ultimately stand for and why this church matters. Our religious education theme this year is Faith in Action. And it will serve as a clarion call to young and old alike to resist even the president and all of the right wing intent on making one race, one religion, one gender, one sexual orientation supreme over all the others. You know, in all our fancy rhetoric about creating a just world, now we actually see what injustice really looks like. The struggle to resist, to persevere, and to ultimately give life the shape of justice. This task stands squarely before us now. The light that shines for inclusivity, fairness, justice, freedom, democracy, and that free and responsible search for truth and meaning will shine brighter than any tiki torch ever held at a protest rally. So welcome back to church. This is where we belong right now in history. We will move the progressive needle forward with our actions, our voices, our singing, our demonstration, and with a commitment, a deep commitment to uphold our principles and ensure that they will guide our children and our grandchildren safely into the future. Amen to that. I think we need to close with hymn number 180, this light. In closing, let's get our arms around the meaning of hope. You know, hope suggests that another world is possible, not promised, not guaranteed, but possible. Hope calls for action. Think about it. Action is impossible without hope. Hope is not like a lottery ticket you can sit on the couch and clutch feeling lucky. Hope is an axe. It's an axe you break down doors with in an emergency, because it's hope that shoves you out the door so you can begin work on the future. A future free of hate, free of war, free of injustice. Sharpen those axes. Amen.
David, thank you for bringing us back down. We're going to take just a moment. We're not setting a new system of announcements. This is just really very important. It's a lovely brand new idea that makes our work with the refugee families a bit more inclusive. So I'd like to ask Andrea and Johanna to please come down and bring the congregation up to speed. Johanna? Okay.
Members and friends of this congregation have been helping the International Rescue Committee resettle refugees in the Salt Lake Valley for 20 years. Together, we have donated truckloads of furniture and household goods, and we've set up apartments for hundreds of refugee families. Now we have 2 new initiatives to support the refugee community.
Good morning. I'm here to tell you about the Pedal Project, which is a project where we accept gently used bicycles and ask members of the congregation to help tune them up and provide them to refugees through the International Rescue Committee. Since July 1st, we have provided 6 bicycles to refugees, 2 of which hopped on their bikes and rode to their first day of work. The reason this program got started is because the capacity in the community is not enough to provide bicycles for everyone who needs it. A trip on public transportation costs $2.50 each way. So that's $25 a week for someone who goes to work. If you work shift, public transportation is not available to you. Many refugees are very comfortable with bicycles, and that's their preferred form of transportation. So if you would like to become a pedal pusher, please see me in Elliott Hall after. You can donate a bicycle. We really need people to help tune them up. We pay for the materials. You can make a donation to purchase materials, or you can join in delivering a bike to a refugee. Thank you.
The second new initiative is Welcome Baskets. These are new laundry baskets filled with new household items that refugees and the International Rescue Committee have requested. If you have a little folding money in your pocket, you could buy a soccer ball or a tool kit or a tea kettle. If you're down to loose change, how about a potato peeler? If you're up for a challenge, you can check out a laundry basket. Take the shopping list, ask your family, friends, neighbors, co-workers, hiking club to help you fill it. Details and shopping lists are at the Congregational Life table. Those of you who are interested in meeting refugees through one of the church-sponsored activities, donations and apartment setups, the Pedal Project, or Welcome Baskets, or if you're interested in volunteering directly with the International Rescue Committee, you're asked to attend a 1-hour volunteer training session. And the International Rescue Committee will be offering that training right here at church on Sunday, September 24th from 12:30 to 1:30, and again on October 8th from 12:30 to 1:30. Sign-up sheets are at the Congregational Life table. So gather the spirit, let your light shine, come to one of the volunteer training sessions and get involved in refugee resettlement, or if you've been involved, stay involved. Thank you.
Johanna, thank you. Thank you both very much for just expanding this program that's been a part of this church for 20 years. Glad we're moving forward. Let us adjourn for coffee, conversation, and welcome back, all of you.